Okay, today we're going to talk about modeling a complex hubcap, and the concept I'm going to show today, or the modeling concept I'm going to show today, is hopefully useful beyond just a hubcap and can help with, you know, all kinds of things that are just kind of getting to a next level of complexity here. And so the general concept here is going to be to model it in 2D first and then kind of extrude it out into 3D, and that kind of helps kind of manage more complicated shapes here, or the creation of more complicated shapes. And so if you want to use the reference along with me, on the D2L under demo resources, I have this image wheel 1. I should probably find better image. We're going to use it as reference. We're not going to trace this one per se. We're just going to use this as kind of like a rough reference here. But I'm going to use this image and just download it. And let's see here, under downloads. Oops. I'm going to load it into, I have a project, a Maya project already open here, and I'm going to keep working with that. And I'm just going to load this into my source images here. So I have my project folder here, and I'm going to load that reference image into my source images, and then open up Maya. And there's already a ton of demos on importing reference images, so if you're having trouble remembering that, just be sure to kind of double check one of those. I'm going to work from the top view here, and so go from your perspective view to your top view and press spacebar, and then go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, and find the wheel. I'll scale it up, and I want this just to be a little centered up. The concept I'm going to do here is I'm going to model the top right corner, and then I'm going to use the mirror tool to mirror it over once and then down once. So we'll kind of get the whole wheel just by modeling a quarter of it. So that's kind of the main concept. So I'm just going to bring the wheel in to the top view. I'm going to go to the perspective view and just push it down so that it'll be out of the way. And then with the wheel image selected, I'm going to go to the attribute editor for the image, and with the alpha gain I'm just going to change the opacity of the image so that you'll be able to see the model a little bit better here. So the reason I'm doing the top view is so that I don't have to, when I'm going to create a pipe to kind of start this object off, and it'll just make it so I don't have to rotate the pipe. So next step, creating a pipe. So create polygon primitives, and then where is it? Pipe. Right here. So create polygon primitives and pipe. I'm going to scale it up a little bit. So the idea here, and I'm going to turn on X-ray, is I want this inner circle right here. So I'm going to scale it up just by dragging that center box left to right. That's appearing yellow right there. I'm going to scale it up to this point. And the idea here is that you want to have it so that this edge loop right there is going around the center. But before you get too far on this, kind of scaling it into position, let's go into object mode and go into the third tab under the attribute editor. So we're under the attribute editor under the third tab that says polypipe 1. And I'm going to change the subdivision axis down to 16. Remember, I like to keep it divisible by 4 here, and this is going to become clear here in a moment why. And next up, I'm going to go to either the front or the side view here at the bottom, doesn't matter which one. And I'll go into face mode, and then I'm just going to drag and select like this to select all the bottom faces. You can see here the top faces aren't selected here, but I just did that to easily select all the bottom faces, and then I'll just press delete on my keyboard to delete them out. And here what I need to do is, when I press W, you see the anchor point's in a little bit of the wrong place. So what I'm going to do So I'm going to go to my side view. So again, whenever I switch views quickly like that, I'm just hovering my cursor over and pressing the space bar. And then I'm just going to move the object down to the 0 point so that it's onto the grid there. Doesn't need to be perfect, but just kind of get it close. And from here, I need to move that anchor point. So if you recall how to move an anchor point, you press D as in dog, to move the anchor point. And you can just place it like that, and that'll probably be good enough. But something I like to do here is I like to hold down X. You see right here, it goes from a square to circle when you hold down X. So again, I press D to move the anchor point, but now X, I'm holding down X. So I only press D, but I'm holding down X, and I hold down X and it snaps it right to that center point of the grid. And so now I'll press W just to kind of move out of that. And now this object's anchor point is 100% on the 0 point of the grid, the XYZ grid here, which is great. So that's a nice step to do. And so again, all I did was I deleted the faces out of the bottom of the pipe. I moved the pipe so that it's, along the ground. The anchor point was down here. So I turned on the move tool. Then I pressed D to change the anchor point, and then I held down X and then snapped the anchor point to the center point. And then just press this button to kind of get out of that. So that gives us our base shape. And this inner circle, let me go to 2 view. There we go. I want this to be a top view, and I'm going to keep the perspective view over here. Get the modeling toolkit over to the right. And in the top view, I'm going to change the shading to X-ray so that I can see through the model. So shading and X-ray on that window. And you see here, when I turn on shading there, it only turns it on there in that window, but it's still opaque over here on the right. And what I want to do here is right click. Okay. Let me just check my project window because Maya's acting a little buggy on me. Yep, that's right. Alright, so I'm going to select that outer edge loop and press the R button for the scale tool, or you can press this button right here, and just grabbing that center box, I'm just going to drag from left to right and scale it up so that it gets a little closer to that outside wheel shape. So from here, I think I need to restart Maya here. Unfortunately, it is just not okay. I'll try to hold out and see if I can not have to restart Maya. But I might need to restart in a second because it is acting really buggy right now. So I have this pipe right here, and I'm going to duplicate it and create this outer pipe right here. I'm going to ignore this whole area, and I'm just only going to worry about the outer rim here. So to duplicate, you just go to, if you recall, there's a duplicate special lesson. I believe it's going to be the one before this one. But all we need to do is just a normal duplicate. So edit, duplicate that object. And then I'm going to scale it up. And I'm going to scale up the duplicate kind of up to there. Again, I'm worrying about the inner rim first. And then I'm going to scale the outer rim to get that into position. So right click and go to edge mode. And select that outer rim. And again, you can just do that by double clicking. Then I'm going to press the scale button and drag it in. One really important note here is this technique I'm working is helpful and it saves some time here. But if you don't kind of change the anchor point to that center point, this technique I'm showing might get a little sloppy for you. You can still do it, but when you scale it up, it's going to scale up vertically too, and this keeps it so it scales flat, the fact that we had changed the anchor position here. So at this point, we've created a pipe, we've deleted a lot of the faces on it, so it's just like a piece of paper. Before that, we made sure it had 16 sides to it. Then I positioned one here and moved the anchor point so that it's right in that center point by holding down X, and have that. And then I duplicated it and scaled it out to here, so we have two objects now. And I kind of position them like this on the wheel. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click and go to face mode, and I'm going to delete out the left side of the outer circle, and I'm going to delete out the bottom right side, right quarter of it right there. And then I'm going to do the same for the inner rim here. So right click, go to face. Real quick, I'm just going to add my reference image onto a display layer and lock it so that it gets out of the way. So again, you can find that in previous lessons how I did that. It's to create a display layer, you look for the channel box layer editor under Windows, general editors, channel box layer editor right there. I selected the reference image, went to layers, create layer from selected, and then I pressed this button. It came in looking like this. Press that button once, press it twice so it says VPR, and now it's a reference image and I can't click on it. I think what was happening before is my thought I kept wanting to click on the reference image, and that is not what I wanted to be doing. So just to pick up where I left off before that interruption, I'll right click and go to face mode. And I'm going to do the same thing I did for the outer rim, just delete the left side and then the bottom right quarter. So now we're only worrying about modeling this quarter here. And this brings me to why I'm only using this reference image as just like a rough reference. I'm not going to really be tracing it per se. And the reason for that is if you look at a reference image, I'm going to call these trees like the spokes, you know. I'll just call them spokes. So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spokes. And so it's kind of got some symmetry down the center. But just to save time with this tutorial, I'm just going to make it so that it's symmetrical amongst the quarters here. If I were to model this and I wanted to do it 100% accurate to this reference image, I would work on the right half entirely and then mirror it over once. But I just want to save some time on this tutorial, so I'm going to change it up a little bit and only model the top right corner and then mirror it once and then again to kind of get the whole thing here. So to start off with this model, can I have it in position? I'm going to right click and go to edge mode, and you can see here this seems like selections are going a lot better here now that I've turned my reference image into a reference display layer so it can't be clicked on, and knock on wood there. So I'm going to go to the modeling toolkit. I'm going to keep this open on the right side, and then additionally whenever I model I like to go to mesh tools and break out the mesh tools window by clicking that double dotted line that's right here. So again, I just go to mesh tools, break out that double dotted line, drag it down here because I like to use the insert edge loop tool sometimes. And then again, just make sure when you use the insert edge loop tool that the options box is pressed and that you have insert with edge flow turned on. So just kind of like to have all that open while I'm modeling here. So with this edge selected, I'm going to extrude the edge, and remember that you can only extrude edges and faces, and extruding the whole object doesn't work. So just edges and faces. This is a flat object, and I'm going to try to pull it out to another flat object, so edges is going to be useful here. So I'll press extrude with that edge selected, and don't pull it out quite yet. And so the reason is I want this to be symmetric, or keep a line with symmetry here along that center mark so that I can mirror it. And if I pull it out right now, you see it goes off in the direction that that edge is already facing. So what you want to do is press this power button to the top right, and that changes it from local, so it's extruding locally out of the direction of that edge is already facing. And I'm going to change it to world by pressing that. You see it moved from vertical to left to right. And so now when I extrude, it'll pull it out along the XYZ axis. And so I'm just going to pull it out to maybe this point right here. I'm going to turn on X-ray so you can see what I'm doing a little better. And I'm going to pull it to this point and press Q when I'm done to make sure that I don't extrude twice by mistake. And from here, I'm going to right click, go to Vertex, select that vertex right there, and drag it to the side. And keep in mind, I want these vertices to stay right along that 0 point. So I'm not going to take any of these vertices and move them that way or that way. It's just up or down. That's all I got on that vertex right now. So I'm going to position this, and the idea here is that I want to make it so when I extrude this edge, it'll move out in the direction of that inner spoke right there. So I will, with that edge selected, I'll press extrude, and this time local's fine because we don't have to worry about symmetry right here because what we're modeling it after goes out in a different direction. So I'll just pull it out there, press Q. I always press Q pretty quickly just to make sure I get out of extrude. Right click and go to Vertex. And remember that I'm not going to be tracing this model exactly. I'm just kind of using it as reference. So I'm just going to pull that spoke out to there. And you see I'll leave some distance between the outer rim and that spoke right there. So I just pull it out to that position right there. And so now I'm going to do this spoke right here. Similar process is I'm going to select these two edges. Notice that this isn't along an axis that mirrors, so I probably won't need to worry about that world local thing when I extrude, most likely. So I'll extrude, and again I had this edge and that edge selected right there, and I'll just drag it out and press Q. Not even worrying about getting it exactly right, because I'll do that in this step where I right click and go to Vertex. I'll move this vertice to that center point. I'll move this one in here, this one in here. And I'm trying to set it up so that I can extrude out the two inner branches here, which I'll need to do one at a time. So I'll right click and go to edge. I'll select that edge, and then I'll extrude it. Again, just using the green arrow to pull it out. Press Q. Right click Vertex. I'll just move that into position. I'll just move it a little over to the side. I'm going to move all these just a little over to the side there. Okay. I'll right click and do edge. And now I'm going to extrude this edge out for this branch. So again, it's this edge that I have selected right there. Press extrude. Not going to worry about the local world. Local is going to be fine here. So I'll pull it out right there. Press Q to get out of extrude to make sure I don't extrude twice. Right click and go to Vertex Mode. And again, I'm just going to position this right there. And now I'm going to make the last spoke, the lower spoke, which I'm going to build kind of the same way I did this one that I have highlighted right there, just for the bottom side. And so I'll right click and go to edge, select that edge, and extrude. This time I need to make sure that I don't do local. You see how it extruded off of that world 0 axis point right there? So I'm going to press the power button in the upper right of the extrude tool. See how the arrow's changed? And it goes horizontal right there. And so now when I extrude it out, it'll go along that line. I'll press Q to get out of extrude. And this is going to be this area right here that I'm making. I'm just pushing it up because I want this to be symmetrical along quarters here. So I'll right click and go to Vertex. Change the position a little here. Something like that. From here, I'll right click and go to Edge. Oops. I think I made a mistake there. Okay, I'll right click and go to Edge, and I'll select this edge right here. I'm going to extrude it out to make that the smaller spoke that comes out here. So extrude. Local's fine for this one. And I'll pull it out in that direction. Press Q. And here I'm just going to shape it out. Again, you can kind of see I'm not tracing the. It's nice to have a reference image you can trace, but again, for this one, I kind of want to just do my own thing a little bit on this tutorial. But sometimes that can be good, you know. You just have your. It's good to have video reference right here, because there's, you know, I'm looking at it constantly, the reference image. I'm just not entirely tracing it in this particular instance. So you can see here what I've done with the model. So we had this pipe, which we kind of cut into a quarter, and we have this pipe, which we cut into a quarter, and then on the inner pipe, I extruded this edge right here to do this, and made sure for this first extrusion, this making this face right here, that I did it in world rather than local. Same thing at the bottom. I extruded this edge down here, made sure that it was world rather than local when I extruded, again by pressing that power button in the top right of the extrude tool. And then extruded that out. And then for these center areas right here, I selected both of the edges that were right there and extruded them at once. And then separately, I extruded this edge right here, and then this edge right here, using extrude's standard settings, and just kind of pulled them out in that direction. You see here that I'll leave a little space between the inner wheel and the outer wheel here. You can get it closer if you want, but it doesn't matter, and that'll become clear in a later step. So here we have things in a pretty good spot. And before I proceed here, this is pretty important. I want to, let's see if it'll let me do it. So I'm going to use the control, the multi-cut tool and press control. And if you see here, when you press the multi-cut tool and press control, it lets you add an edge loop. Remember that the multi-cut tool's edge loop is different than the insert edge loops tool, because this one just leaves the mesh exactly as it is. If you see here, where's a good spot to add it? I'll just add it right there. And you see it doesn't change the shape, the overall shape of the mesh at all. I'll let it undo. If I do the insert edge loop tool, it kind of finds, it's really subtle here. In this instance, it can not be subtle, but when I do the insert edge loop tool, it kind of rounds things out for me. You see that? And so it kind of rounded out that spot right there. And a lot of the times it can be a little more drastic. So whenever I'm adding an edge loop, the insert edge loop tool can be really helpful, but you just got to be a little careful if the edge loop is kind of hit these outer edges right here or these outer edges right here, because we want those to stay on the grid and not move. And so the multi-cut tool can be helpful a lot of the time here. So for this inner spoke here, I just want a little more geometry in this thing. So I'm just going to hold down control, press the multi-cut tool, hold down control, and I'm just going to add 2 subdivisions in here. So I just add an edge loop there, an edge loop there, multi-cut tool, control. That's how I did that. So from there, now we're just kind of getting to a stage where we're gonna add some geometry into this thing. So from there, I'm going to select the outer rim now, and I'm going to press smooth. So go to select the outer rim in objects mode right here. Make sure you're in the modeling toolkit and just press the smooth button right here, or again you can find it up here. So just press the smooth button. You see it rounds it out a little bit, adds some geometry. It didn't round it out perfectly though, so I need to right click and go to vertex. Just make a small adjustment here. So these vertices I just need to drag down a little bit. these vertices I need to drag left a little bit, just to give that a round shape. So I did that just to give this outer side a little more in the way of geometry. So next up, it's time to combine these two objects together. And this is maybe the most helpful or useful or important kind of three-step process I want to show in this tutorial. This and the mirroring. The mirroring is super important, and then this is super important. So this is how you combine objects in Maya. So we have two different objects we want to combine. And so what I'm going to do is make sure I'm in objects mode. So step 1 of 3 steps is I'll hold down Shift, select both objects there, and then I'll press this combine button right here under the modeling toolkit. Keep your eye over here to see what happens. So I press combine, and you see here it leaves instances of wheel 1 and wheel 2 kind of in the modeling history. But you see this plane right here, that icon, that means that this combined into one shape. And you can tell it's one shape because when I tap on it, it all lights up green. But it's not connected yet. So step 1's done. But now I need to connect these things up. So first thing I'm going to do, so I'm going to just move this over a little bit. Let's make some small adjustments. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add some edge loops in this outer rim, because basically what I'm going to do is I need to create an edge there and an edge there so that I can kind of combine this inner wheel out to it. So I'm going to use the Insert Edge Loop tool because I want it to round out, because we're kind of making the wheel shape out here. So Insert Edge Loop tool, and then I'm just going to make an edge loop there, and then an edge loop there. You can see it kind of does a lot of the work for me on that. That's kind of okay. I'm going to do the same here. I only need one edge loop in this spot because this edge loop is going to be fine. So same thing. I'm just going to go to Insert Edge Loop tool. Be sure when you're using the Insert Edge Loop tool that you draw on the line, not in the middle. If I draw right here, it doesn't do anything. But, oops. But if I draw on the edge, it will make the line. So again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make an edge that I can sew together here between those two. I'm just going to go clockwise down. Continue to make edge loops on the outer rim. So Insert Edge Loop tool. I'll draw one there. I'll draw one there. Then this edge loop looks fine, so I'm just going to add one more here. Right there is fine. Okay, so I added a few more edge loops on the outer rim, and you can see since I used the Insert Edge Loop tool, this kind of kept its rounded shape, which is good out there. So now the next step is we're going to right click and go to Vertex Mode. So this is kind of step 2 really of combining two objects. I guess you could say it's a 4-step process because there's the combining the objects, which could be step 1. If we're going to divide this into 4 steps, the second step would be to make sure that there's a vertice for each side that you want to combine onto. So I had to add some edge loops in there. And so the next step is snapping the vertices together. So I'm going to select the vertice that I want to move, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm in the move mode here so that, you know, I have my normal move arrow showing up right there. And then I'll hold down V as in vampire, and you see it when I hold down V, that yellow box goes to a circle right there. And then I'll just click that and then drag it, and it'll just snap to the point. And I'll do that again here. So make sure that I'm in move, hold down V, and then just snap it right there. So that snaps the vertices into the same place here, but they're not, these two vertices are in the same location, but they're not, you see when I just click on it and then drag, there's still two vertices there, so they're not welded together yet. So to weld them together or merge them together, you need to make sure to drag and select like this for that to merge these two vertices. And this is the fourth step, or the last step here, and it's the this button right here, merge, or you can go up to edit mesh and merge right there. And so I'll just press the merge button. You see here distance threshold shows up, which is Maya's way of telling me that it merged. Let me just do that again to make sure. One thing that's really important with merging is that it doesn't work if you just click on it like that. If you just kind of click like that, it's not going to merge because only one vertex is selected here. So you need to make sure that both vertices are selected by just drag a box over it and select like that. Press merge. And so now that's merged together. And you can test whether things are merged just by clicking on a vertex and then dragging it around. Does the rest of the mesh drag around with it as if it were combined? And if so, then great, it worked. So let's work clockwise down the model here. And this goes really quickly once you get used to it. So make sure it's in move mode, right? This vertex that I want to move, hold down V as in vampire. It'll get rounded there in the center. Click the center and then just drag it up and it'll automatically snap to the point. Drag and select like that, the vertex. So make sure both vertices are selected there because there's still two vertices right now. And then I'll press that merge button and they will merge together. Repeating the step is I'll select this vertex, make sure it's in move mode, press V, snap it, drag and select, then merge. Just going to keep doing that, moving clockwise here. So move, V as in vampire, drag and select, and merge. One thing that's really important here that I need to mention is that I snap those together. If I drag and select a bunch of vertices like that, or if I drag and select vertices like that and then press merge, it looks like it goes okay, but just don't do that. It can really cause some problems for you. So I'm just going to edit undo to make sure that that doesn't happen. When you merge vertices together, just make sure that you're merging the vertices that you want to have welded together, right? Like I don't want to weld these vertices together with those vertices, you know? So just drag and select here and then press merge. Last set here, so hold down V, drag and select, merge, hold down V, drag and select, and merge. And so now you should have a wheel that is combined at this point. And we're actually starting to get pretty close on this thing. So if I move this out to perspective mode, if I press 3, which is the preview for smooth, you can see that it's like pretty weird and rounded in here. And so we just need to add some more geometry into this thing to help define it some more. You know, if you want it to have like a curved shape like this, then, you know, we're in pretty good shape already. But I want to, I still want to kind of mimic the how do you say this? Capture the right feel of this hubcap that I'm using as reference. And so in order to make it so that when I smooth it, you know, remember when you press 3, it's only a preview of smooth it. We're not actually smoothing it. But when I press that, if I want that to be less rounded, I just need to add more geometry into this thing to help define it some more. So I'm just going to start adding some geometry here. So I'm going to go back to the top view. And the first set of geometry I'm going to add is I'm going to use the Insert Edge Loop tool right here under Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop tool. I'm just going to add a little more geometry into this outer rim, just as needed. And I might need to just manually drag some things. Again, having the reference image is tremendously helpful here to have it round out or create the right shape. I just feel like it needs a little more geometry out here in some sections, and you want to have it be pretty relatively averaged in terms of the amount of geometry this thing has overall. And the edge loop tool usually works really well, but once you get out to these outer edges, sometimes it just doesn't do an awesome job of totally getting a perfect sphere going. So when you add these edge loops, you might need to just double check it, make sure that you're getting a round shape there. So again, I just use the insert edge loop tool for that. The multi-cut tool would not be nearly as good for this purpose right there. You see, so I'm just kind of adding more. Now we're getting to a stage where we're adding more geometry into this thing. So now I'm going to do a similar process, but I'm going to add an edge loop for each, to add more into the radial lines here. So I'm going to do the insert edge loop tool again. And I'm going to click one in here, right down the middle of that. It does a pretty good job rounding things out for me, but I might just want to grab this vertice right here, just pull it up a little bit to round it out. I'll go back to objects mode, and then I might just go ahead and add all the edge loops that I want to do here. So I added one there just a moment ago where my cursor is. I'm going to add one here, add one here, and add one there. Those others did a better job of rounding out. So we have some geometry, some more geometry in the rim, some more geometry in that outer circle there. And so now let's add some more geometry into our spokes, because if we select the object and press 3, it's still pretty rounded out there. So I'll press 1. So the first thing I'm going to do here, and I think this will be a good thing to demonstrate, is I'm going to add an edge loop right here where my cursor is, right there, and right there, because you see when I press 3 it really rounds out there. Watch what happens to those areas when I add an edge loop. So I'll just do insert edge loop, draw one in relatively close to the edge. I'm gonna have to reposition a little bit. You know what? I'm gonna use the multi-cut tool and hold control because it kind of, mine moved a little bit and I didn't like that. So add an edge loop right there, hold down control. Again, using the multi-cut tool instead this time. Use the multi-cut right there. Because again, the edge loop just kind of made my geometry jump a little bit in a way I didn't really care for. So add an edge loop there and an edge loop here. So it's the same for each spoke, you know, just adding one close to that outer rim. And so now with that geometry added, and again it was right there for each spoke that I was adding a new edge. And if I press 3 now, you see that outer rim gets a lot better out there than it was before. So let's kind of do that for the rest of this thing now. So here, I'm going to work on the outer edges, the outer spokes first, and then do the inner edge, the inner spoke. For the outer spokes, I'm going to start by using the multi-cut tool, the tool that adds an edge loop without changing the geometry, because again we have this edge right here. That edge right there and that edge right there that I want to keep in place, and if I use the edge loop tool it might get moved a little bit, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 new edge loops here into the base of each spoke. So I'm going to use the multi-cut tool. I guess I'm only going to do the outer spokes this first round. So 2 for each one here. So 1, 2, and then 1, 2, right there. Once you do that, press Q to get out of it to make sure we don't keep adding edge loops. And then I'm going to right click and go to Vertex. I'm just going to shape this a little bit. And I might need to go back into X-ray so I can see my reference model again. And I'm just going to trace my reference image a bit. I'm trying to get something rounded here. And on this lower spoke, I am I don't have, sorry, I zoned out a little bit while I was working. I have, the reference image doesn't line up there, you know, which is on purpose. And so I was just having to use my imagination of where this would go. Right there. And so now, let's do the same thing for the inner spoke, the base of the inner spoke. So 2 edge loops. This time I'm going to use, you know, I was just thinking I should probably have used 3. That's okay. So this time I'm going to use the insert edge loop tool, and I'll select that, and I'll need to kind of make some changes to it. So press Q to get out of it, right click and do vertex, and let's drag some vertices. So I'm doing the center point here first. I'm pressing Q between each one because the move tools kind of get in your way, you know, while you're trying to go from vertex to vertex. So I'm pressing Q and W, just going back and forth between Q and W a lot of the time here. So look at this. So I'm gonna do, I'm cinching this in right here, and I'm making sure that I get this one right in this instance. And so now I kind of cinched that in a good amount. I'm actually going to do 2 edge loops, so 3 total. I'm going to add an edge loop on each side of this edge right here. So I have that edge, I'm going to do an edge loop here and an edge loop there. So I'll do insert edge loop tool, draw one in there, draw one in there. You notice how since I drew this edge in correctly right here and took some time shaping it, I just dropped those other 2 in and they just fell right into place the second I put them in. And so the thing I was stammering about before was I kind of forgot that for a moment. And I actually want 3 edge loops on each of these, the base of these outer spokes. You don't have to do this, but might be nice. So I selected, oops, those three vertices and those 3 vertices, and then I made sure to use my move tool and just moved them vertically, and I made sure not to move them left or right. So just vertical or downward. And I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to add one more edge loop in here. So multi-cut tool, control, just draw it in, right click. So I press Q to get out of it, right click, go to vertex, and I'm just going to drag in the vertice a little bit. I'm going to do the same steps over here. So I'm just going to drag that in. And again, I'm just dragging, in this case, I'm only dragging left to right. I'm not doing up or down because again, I want this to stay along this axis right there. And so now I'm going to select these 3 vertices and just pump them in a little. And right click and go to Objects Mode. And then I'm going to go to Multi-Cut and hold Control. Punch one in there. Right click and go to Vertex and shape it in. So apologies if I went a little fast there. All I'm doing in this section is I was focusing on this area right here. Let's see here, Control Shift. Being a little slow today on my selections here. But these areas that I'm highlighting here, I was just using the multi-cut tool, and I added those 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 edge loops into it. And then I just, every time I added an edge loop, I just right clicked and went to vertex and just shaped them up a little bit. That's all I was doing there. So that's why I was kind of going fast, is because again, I was just, each time I was adding an edge loop, I was mainly just using the multi-cut tool, holding control, adding an edge loop, then right clicking and going to vertex mode, and just dragging vertex by vertex and just shaping it, you know? So nothing fancy going on there. So now that's shaped, but we still need to do the long areas of the spokes here. So if I press 3, you can see here that on some of these, that's getting close, and this is getting close, and it's just mainly right here. It looks like some MC Hammer pants down here on this one, and so I just need to add some more edge loops in here just to kind of help define this area. So you can just use the multi-cut tool here. So in object mode, right click object mode, I'm going to press the multi-cut tool, and then hold down Control, and then just 1, 2, press Q, right click in Vertex, and here I'll just shape them a little bit. And so now, and again, so what I just did was added that edge loop and that edge loop right there. And now if I press 3, you see that's starting to kind of make the right shape here. So I'll press 1 again, and I'm going to do the same thing for each outer spoke. So multi-cut tool, hold Control, I'll draw one in there, and I'll go ahead and just draw one for the bottom one as well. So right here, so I just drew 2 edge loops. I drew in, using the multi-cut tool, I drew in that edge loop and that edge loop right there. And so here, I'll just right click, go to Vertex. I'm going to turn back on my X-ray so I can see what I'm doing a little better. Just kind of shape the work a little. So just shaping the vertices. Okay, so getting really close now. And so from here, just for good measure, I'm going to do the multi-cut tool. I'm going to add 2 edge loops, and I'm not going to change my mind this time. Sorry about that before. I'm just going to hold Control. I'm going to add 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So for each of these long faces, because there's just, these faces are huge compared to the other ones in the wheel. So I'm just going to hold Control with I press the multi-cut tool, hold Control, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And now when I press 3 on my keyboard, which previews what this will look like when it's smooth, the wheel's making that shape, which is kind of what I want. So again, I'll just press 1. You see, with less geometry, when you press smooth, it changes the shape a ton. And the more edge loops that you add in, or the more, just the more geometry that you have in your model, when you press smooth, the less drastic it's going to change. So just keep that in mind whenever you're modeling something and you press smooth and it like really rounds out in the way you don't like it. Just remember to add more geometry close to another edge, especially, and that'll help harden edges there. So that's kind of how I shape that. And if you imagine for a moment here, if we're trying to make this wheel and we started with a fully 3D object, it would be really tricky, I feel like. And so with those spokes, it could get really hairy in there. And so that's the reason for kind of doing this like paper technique right here. And you'll see here, it's only going to take a few, just some really easy steps here just to make this into a real object here. Pull a Pinocchio here. So what you want to do is right click and go to Objects Mode, and we're going to use the mirror tool. So generally speaking, the mirror button is right here. But remember, when you mirror it, you need to tell Maya which direction you want it to mirror on, because we can have it either mirror left to right here, oops, left to right, or up to down, or down to up. So there's just, you need to tell it which direction to mirror in. So that button's helpful once you have a setting and you want to use it. But to change these parameters, you go to Mesh, Mirror, and then Options box right there. So make sure that the object is selected. You go to Mesh, Mirror, and then the Options box. And from here, the way this works is you can tell, this is actually a pretty simple menu. It's we have the world and the object, so you can tell it, do you want it to mirror across the world, the XYZ 0 space world, or do you want it to mirror from the object's anchor point? My object's anchor point is way over here now, so I do not want to mirror this over the object right now. I definitely want to do world because the thing is centered in the world view. So if you're having a ton of problems mirroring, just check to make sure there's a few catches that can happen. Make sure that this is in if this is an object mode, make sure that that anchor point is in the center, where you want it to mirror across from. World is good here though. You can have it mirror across the X, Y, and Z axis, and you can change it mirroring from a negative or a positive direction in that axis here. I think looking at this, just looking at my XYZ indicator down here, I think a negative X should just kind of work right away. And so that's the XYZ negative or positive direction right there. And then pretty much never want to mess with the combine with original. I always want to combine it, merge with border vertices. That's great. Sometimes, most of the time, automatic's going to be what you want. Sometimes you have to switch it to custom in order to get it to work, and then maybe adjust these settings if you need to. I'm going to try it. And you see here that didn't work. It looked like it worked, but you see here it did some crazy stuff there. And so in order to fix that, I'm going to edit undo. And I think what's going to fix it is changing from automatic to custom right here. And then I'll press apply. And now it's working. Do you see that? So mine went, the default setting was automatic. 9 times out of 10 this is going to work just with those default settings, especially if you model on the right side and mirror it over to the left side. I pressed apply, but you can see some vertices flipped on themselves. Just kind of check the center to see, does that change at all? And so what I did is I changed it from automatic to custom, press apply again, and that time it mirrored correctly. So now, with object mode on, I'm going to mirror this again, and I need to mirror this from the top to the bottom here. That looks like that'll be the Z axis, looking at this area right there. So I'm going to do Z, and I think this time it's going to be positive direction rather than negative. So if I keep it at negative, this is not going to work, I bet, but I'll press apply. You see the model like basically disappears because it kind of mirrored over onto itself. So I'm going to do Z, and I'm going to change the direction to positive rather than negative. Press apply, and now it mirrored in the correct direction. Just to kind of give a further idea of things, let's just see what happens if I'm mirroring the Z. Yeah, or the Y, that flips on top of itself. So if it's not working, just make sure you're mirroring in the correct direction, X, Y, Z, positive or negative. If you did, if you created your object in the center of this grid right here, the XYZ space, then world is going to work great for you there. So that's kind of why we snapped that anchor point to the middle when we first started. I'm going to unhide my model by pressing H. And sometimes you might need to change it from automatic to custom. So most of the time you won't, but with this demo you might need to. So this thing's all fully mirrored at this point, and you can see it's still a flat object, but we do have a pretty complex shape now, which is great. And you see I took some liberties from the reference image, but kind of stuck with the spirit of it. And so to make this three-dimensional, really easy. So we're just going to right-click, go to face mode. Really important that you're in face mode. Don't do this from object mode. If you extrude from object mode, it's going to be a disaster. So just face mode, select every face on it. So just do a drag and select on all the faces. And then just press extrude. And I think you can just do the blue arrow. If you drag it up, that looks good. Careful, if you drag it down, the object will appear black right here. And so that just means that the faces are inside out. So just drag it up, and it should appear gray here. If on your model there are faces on it that look like that, so it looks like in this instance, all the faces are black right here. The way to fix that is I will select all the faces. So again in face mode, right click face, select all the faces, and then go up to mesh display, and then reverse, third down. So mesh display reverse, and that'll just reverse the faces and have them facing right side up. And that also works if you have just in your extrusion or your model here, if you have what's otherwise a gray looking, a gray model here, but then you see that you have a few like that. If you just select those faces and then go to mesh display and then reverse, we have a clean object now. And so now this model can be finished if you like it to be. It's still, if we rendered it, it would still be a little faceted. There's not quite enough geometry in it yet. So one thing we can do is preview what it would look like smooth by pressing 3. And so if you want a very rounded spoke, we could end it right there with a smooth. But I just kind of want to show real quick how I'd continue to model this thing. So the first thing I would do is I would maybe add some bevels into some of these things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my mirror technique again, just with a 3D object. So I'm going to drag and select, I'm in the top view right now. And I'm going to drag and select in face mode and select all the left faces and make sure that you don't, by mistake, select any extras across the, that, what is it, that Z space 0 point border there. And I will delete those faces, make sure that any strays get deleted as well in here. I did not do a good job making that selection there, but just kind of zoom in, make sure that you don't leave any faces, hanging over there. And I'm going to do the same for the bottom right corner. And so what this is going to do is I'm going to model on this quarter right here, and I'm only going to need to do it once. Then I'll just press mirror, mirror again, and then I'm done. And I won't have to mirror it, 25 times. I can just bevel things once. So I'm going to, in edge mode, select this edge right here. I might have to manually select the whole thing. And then in the modeling toolkit, I'd press bevel. I'm a little concerned about my bevel right there. I think that might be okay. And you can add segments to it if you want. Hopefully everyone's fully familiar with the bevel tool at this point. And I'll just kind of go one by one and do that. Selecting these edges. So I'll have to double click 3 times, holding shift to kind of get that edge loop right there. And I will bevel again. I'm just going to add 2 segments to it. I'm going to stick with the 0.5 fraction in the standard depth. Kind of like that rounded shape there. This one's going a little weird, my bevel, but I think I can live with it. So stay in an edge mode. Double clicking, holding shift for all those bevels right there, and then I will press bevel. So the reason I'm doing these bevels is the model is just looking a little too rounded for my taste. And so if you want to kind of harden the edges a little bit, beveling can be a good way to do that. One more, so edge, holding down shift and double clicking, bevel. And notice that I'm remembering these settings here since I want all these bevels to be the same. And so now with that done, I should be able to mirror this again. So I'll go to mesh and then mirror options, And I'm going to do -X the first time. Apply. Looks like that worked. Always just when you mirror, just kind of double check. I ended up with some triangles there, which I don't love, but I can live with that right now. And that was my fault when I was beveling. I kind of caught that earlier, but wanted to keep moving here. Triangles can be okay though. It's 5-sided and beyond that you really have to worry about here. I mean, again, try not to have triangles. So now I'll do the Z positive direction and press apply. And I'll close that out. And so now we have the wheel with just, oops, a little bit of a bevel happening there. And so now when I smooth it, and I'll turn off the wireframe unshaded. Now when I smooth it, there's a little bit, you see it's like a harder edge happening there amongst the rim, which is more of what I was going for here. And it's a little rounded in the center still. So I'm going to press 1. No need to mirror around here. Should be able to just right click and go to edge. Double click to get that whole edge loop right there. Then I will bevel again. And this time I'll add 2 segments. Or 3, I mean. And make it a smaller bevel. My computer's starting to slow down. I should, if I was smart, I would go ahead and save right now. So I'm going to save my work. And so this thing's getting close. Something else I want to show here is soft selection tool can actually be useful here. So let me just kind of demonstrate the soft selection tool. Before I use it, I'm going to go ahead and smooth this thing. I feel good about this shape overall, and I'm ready to move forward with it. Don't do the smooth option until you feel really good about it, and make sure to maybe even once you save it, start saving it as a different version. So file save scene as wheel 2 after you smooth it, because it's kind of a destructive way to work. So now this thing's smooth. So now that it's smooth, let's look at the soft selection tool. I think it can be useful here. So if you recall, the soft selection tool is normally when you right click and do vertex or edge, you are selecting one vertex at a time and moving that one vertex at a time. The soft selection tool is when you double click this button right here, your selection button, then you'll have this menu here. You see the soft selection tab, then you can click it. And so now, if I were to drag that vertex, it would grab a bunch of vertices at once. Pretty fun tool. And so what I want to do is I want to right click and go to edge mode. Let's just say I select this edge loop right here, if it'll allow me to do it. It's hard to see, but I selected this edge loop right there, going around the circle. I need to change my fall off radius quite a bit. Let's change my fall off radius. In my case, it's going to be 1. What I'm looking at is the yellow is going to be affected the most when I pull that edge up, and the red less so, and the black even less so. So now, if I move up, you see it kind of creates like a rounded shape all at once here. We did this technique earlier with the glass of water, kind of modeling water ripples, for instance. So let me just show that again. So what I had done is, I might just switch it this time, is I selected that edge loop right there, or the last time I selected this inner edge loop right there. And again, I'm just selecting it by double clicking on it in edge mode. And I double clicked this button right here, and then I changed it from normal select, where it would just move one edge at a time, to soft select, and now it'll move multiple edges at a time. And I'm just changing the fall off radius until it reaches a point that'll look good on my model, because I only want this kind of inner circle to move. So that should be good. And from here, I just press the Move tool, or W. You can move it up a little. And, you know, doesn't take much. Just want a little bit of a shape there. Right-click Objects Mode. And so now I have like a nice little bevel happening on that thing. So that's how to model that wheel. If you want to use, you see in my reference image that I have some holes punched in for the what do you call those, the bolts, not bolts, whatever. You can use booleans for that. And let's see here. And so if you want to punch holes in it using booleans, I'm not going to run through that now because you can just go back to the last video and I show exactly how to do that in the video right before this one. So the video before this one goes over booleans and duplicate special. And so if I wanted to punch holes in that, I would make sure this model's in a good place, because remember, booleans is a pretty messy technique in terms of what it does to the mesh, adding 5-sided faces and things like that. But I would create a pipe and position it where I want my holes to be punched right there in the model, probably using duplicate special to kind of position it, and then use the booleans technique to punch holes into this hubcap here. So if you decide you want to do that technique to your shape here, refer back to the most recent lesson here, the one before this one, and you'll have that. So that is how to model a complicated hubcap right there. And I didn't model it exactly after this one, but I just kind of wanted to kind of show the steps that kind of go into it. And yeah, this general concept or technique of modeling like it's a piece of paper and kind of finding your shape by extruding edges and then combining objects. You know, it's kind of like stitching paper together a little bit and then extruding it out as one of the later steps is actually a super common way to model complex objects. So again, this is the same concept that I was using for the car technique that showing earlier on in this class, just a week or two ago. And it can be useful for all kinds of things here.